The stars looked cold through the bridge windows of the UES Retribution, as Commander Hana Kim stared into the black void of space. Her ship moved through the Kepler sector like a hunting wolf, with weapons ready and shields up, because this part of space belonged to nobody and death could come from anywhere. The Retribution was not the biggest ship in the human fleet, but it was tough and fast with enough firepower to make any enemy think twice before starting a fight. Hana had been commanding this ship for 3 years, and her crew trusted her with their lives because she had never lost a battle and never left a friend behind. Taeho Park sat at the weapons station checking the plasma cannons for the 10th time today because he was nervous about something he could not name. He had been Hana's friend since their academy days when they were young and stupid, and thought war was glorious instead of bloody and cruel. Now they were older and knew better, but they still fought together because some bonds could not be broken by time or fear. Yoo-Jin Lee worked in the engine room where the massive fusion reactors hummed with barely controlled power that could either push the ship faster than light or blow it into atoms. She was the youngest member of the crew, but also the smartest, and could fix anything that broke or make it work better than before. Do-Won Choi plotted their course through the dangerous asteroid fields and nebula clouds that hid pirates and worse things in their dark depths. His steady hands never shook when enemy ships appeared on the scanner, and his calm voice never betrayed fear. Even when death seemed certain, Yunbi Song listened to the radio signals that crossed space carrying messages of hope and despair from distant worlds that might be friends or enemies. Her sharp ears could pick out the faintest transmission, and her quick mind could decode even the most secret alien languages. Wu Jin. Nam stood ready in the medical bay with supplies to heal wounds and drugs to ease pain because war always brought both in equal measure. He had saved more lives than he could count, but he still remembered every face of those he could not save. The distress signal came from the edge of the Kepler Nebula, where the purple and gold gas clouds made sensors work badly and hid ships from view. A human colony transport called the New Soul was sending an emergency beacon saying their engines were dead and life support was failing with 300 civilians on board. Hana knew it could be a trap because pirates like to use fake distress calls to lure rescue ships into ambushes, but she also knew that 300 people would die if she was wrong about it being fake. She ordered the ship to change course toward the signal, because that was what humans did for each other even when it was dangerous. The Retribution moved through space at maximum speed with all sensors scanning for any sign of enemy ships waiting to attack. The nebula made everything harder to see, and the gas clouds played tricks with the instruments so they had to fly almost blind into the trap. Hana felt the wrongness before the sensors detected it because, after years of fighting, she had learned to trust her instincts when they screamed danger. The New Soul was there floating dead in space with no lights and no movement, but something felt wrong about the way it sat in the nebula. Then the attack came from 3 directions at once as massive alien ships decloaked and opened fire with weapons that burned like green stars. The ships were Valthran destroyers with hulls that looked like living bone and weapons that pulsed with sick light. Hana shouted orders as the first plasma blasts hit the shields and made the whole ship shake like it was being torn apart. Taeho returned fire with everything they had, but the enemy ships were too fast and too many, and their shields were stronger than anything humans had seen before. The bridge filled with smoke and sparks as control panels exploded and warning alarms screamed about hull breaches and system failures. Yoo-Jin's voice came over the intercom from the engine room where she was fighting to keep the reactors stable while green fire burned through the hull around her. She said the engines were hit bad and they were losing power fast, but she could give them one more jump to hyperspace if they needed to. Runduwan tried to plot an escape course, but the navigation computer was damaged, and the star charts were scrambled by the alien weapons. Yunbi sent out distress calls on all frequencies hoping that other human ships would hear and come to help. But the nebula was blocking most transmissions. Wu Jin ran through the corridors helping wounded crew members while the ship shuddered under the constant bombardment. The second wave of attacks came harder than the first, and Hana watched her beautiful ship being torn apart piece by piece. The main weapons went offline when a plasma bolt hit the forward battery and turned the guns into melted metal. Life support failed in half the ship and emergency bulkheads slammed shut to keep the air from escaping into space. The engines died with a sound like screaming metal. and the Retribution drifted helpless. As the alien ships moved closer, for the Kill Tai-Ho was still trying to return fire with the backup weapons, when a green beam cut through his station and vaporized him where he sat, Hana screamed his name. But there was nothing left except empty space where her oldest friend had been fighting just seconds before. Yu-Jin died next when the engine room exploded and crushed her under tons of twisted metal while she tried to restart the reactors. Du-Wan and Yunbi were killed when the bridge decompressed and the cold vacuum of space froze their blood in their veins. Wu-Jin lasted longer because he was in the medical bay, which had better armor, but he died alone and afraid when the life support finally failed. Hana survived only because she was in the reinforced command center that was built to withstand direct hits from enemy weapons. She sat in the dark, listening to the silence where her crew's voices should have been, and feeling the cold emptiness of space seeping into her. So the alien ship stopped firing when they detected no more life signs and began moving closer to board the wreck and take whatever they wanted. Hana could hear them talking through the damaged translation system as they attached boarding tubes to her ship's hull. Their voices sounded like grinding metal and breaking glass, but the computer translated their words into human language that made her blood freeze. They talked about how easy it had been to kill the humans and how weak and stupid the Earth people were compared to the mighty Velthran Empire. They said this was just a test to see how human ships would fight, and that soon they would attack the colonies and kill everyone on 30 worlds. The boarding party walked through her ship like they owned it, taking weapons and technology while they laughed about the dead humans. Hana stayed hidden in the command center and listened to them strip everything valuable from the Retribution, while her friends' bodies drifted in the cold corridors. She activated the emergency beacon that would call for help, but kept it on silent mode so the aliens would not detect it. Then she waited in the darkness with nothing but hate to keep her warm, while her enemies celebrated their victory. Aliens left after taking everything they wanted, and the 3 ships disappeared back into the nebula to plan their next attack. Hana was alone in the broken shell of her ship with only emergency power and a few days of air. But she was not thinking about rescue. She was thinking about revenge and how she would make the aliens pay for every drop of human blood they had spilled. The cold stars looked down on the drifting wreck where one human woman planned the destruction of an entire alien fleet. Her ship was crippled and her crew was dead, but her vengeance was just beginning. 3 days passed before the rescue ships found the broken hull of the Retribution, drifting like a metal coffin in the cold darkness of space. Captain Jae-Sung Kang commanded the battleship Indomitable, and he had seen many wrecked ships during his long career, but this one made him feel sick to his stomach. The hull was burned black and twisted into shapes that hurt to look at, while frozen bodies drifted around the wreck like ghosts in the void. His boarding team moved carefully through the dead corridors where ice crystals covered everything, and the only sound was their breathing in the silence. They found Hana in the command center, barely alive, and talking to herself about revenge, while her fingers traced patterns on the dark screens. Her body was weak from 3 days without food or heat, but her eyes burned with a fire that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than rage. The medical team rushed her to the sickbay of the Indomitable, where they pumped warm blood into her veins and fed nutrients into her starving body. She woke up screaming the names of her dead crew and trying to get out of bed to fight enemies that existed only in her nightmares. Dr. Kim held her down while she thrashed and shouted orders to people who would never answer because their voices had been silenced forever. When the drugs finally calmed her, she stared at the ceiling and spoke in a voice as cold as the space between stars. She told them about the trap and the alien ships, and how her friends had died while the enemy laughed about killing humans like they were insects. Captain Kang listened to her report and felt his own anger growing because he had lost friends to alien attacks and knew the pain she carried. He ordered the ship to Frontier Station 7, where Admiral So-Young Hwang commanded the Kepler defense fleet from her fortress in space. The station was a massive structure built from metal and determination, with enough weapons to fight off any alien fleet that dared approach. Admiral Hwang was a small woman with gray hair and scars on her hands from years of fighting wars that most people never heard about. She listened to Hana's story without interruption while her staff officers took notes and marked targets on the star charts covering the walls. The intelligence about the planned attack on 30 human colonies was the most important information the fleet had received in years. 30 worlds meant millions of people who would die if the alien fleet was not stopped before they could complete their plan. Admiral Huang offered Hana command of a new ship with a fresh crew and orders to hunt down the aliens who had destroyed the Retribution. But Hana had a different request that made everyone in the room think she had lost her mind along with her crew. She wanted her old ship back even though the engineers said it was beyond repair and should be scrapped for spare parts. The Retribution was a burned wreck with no engines and no weapons, and holes in the hull big enough to fly smaller ships through. Admiral Huang asked why she wanted a dead ship when she could have a new one with better weapons and stronger armor. Hana smiled for the first time since the attack and explained that her enemies thought she was dead along with her ship. A ghost could go places that a living person could not, and do things that would be impossible for someone the aliens knew was hunting them. The Admiral was quiet for a long time while she considered the request and looked at the fire burning in Hana's eyes. Finally, she agreed and gave orders for the Retribution to be taken to the military shipyard, where the best engineers in the fleet worked. Donghyun Lim was the chief of the shipyard, and he had rebuilt more destroyed ships than anyone else in human space. He looked at the wreck of the Retribution and shook his head, because even he had limits to what miracles he could perform. But Hana showed him the plans she had been drawing during her recovery, and he began to understand what she really wanted. This was not going to be a repair job or even a rebuilding project, but something entirely new hidden inside the shell of the old ship. She wanted everything stripped out that was not necessary for one person to operate the vessel alone in enemy territory. No crew quarters because she would be the only person on board, and no diplomatic facilities because she was not planning to talk to anyone. No science labs or cargo bays or any of the other equipment that peaceful ships carried when they explored the galaxy. Instead, she wanted weapons and more weapons and armor thick enough to stop anything the aliens could throw at her. The new cloaking system that the engineers had, reverse-engineered from captured alien technology, would make her invisible to their sensors. Special heat dampeners would hide the ship's energy signature, and sound baffles would make it silent as death moving through space. Dong Hyun worked day and night with his best people to transform the dead ship into something that had never existed before. They installed the biggest guns that would fit in the weapon bays and added missile launchers that could fire in all directions. The shield generators were military-grade and powerful enough to protect a ship 3 times the size of the Retribution. New engines gave the ship speed that would let it outrun anything that tried to catch it in open space. The computer systems were programmed with every piece of information the fleet had about alien ships and weapons and tactics. Most importantly, they installed the experimental cloaking device that made the ship invisible to all known forms of detection. When the work was finished, the Retribution looked the same on the outside, but inside it had become a weapon designed for one purpose. Hana spent weeks learning to operate every system by herself, because there would be no crew to help when things went wrong. She practiced flying the ship and firing the weapons until she could do both at the same time without thinking about it. The other officers thought she was planning a suicide mission and tried to talk her out of going alone into enemy space. They did not understand that she was already dead inside and had been since the moment she watched her friends die. The living part of her had burned away in the cold darkness of space, leaving only the need for revenge to keep her moving. Admiral Huang came to see her the night before she planned to leave and asked if she was sure about this path she had chosen. Hana looked at the stars through the window and thought about Taiho, joking at his weapons station, and Yujin singing while she worked. She remembered Do-won's steady voice during battle and Yunbi's laugh when she decoded a particularly difficult message. Woo-jin's gentle hands when he treated wounded crew members, and the way he always had a smile for everyone who needed one. Their ghosts stood beside her in the darkness, waiting for justice that would never bring them back but might give their deaths meaning. She told the Admiral that she had made her choice 3 days ago, when she listened to the aliens laugh about killing humans. Tomorrow she would take the Retribution into enemy space and begin hunting the creatures who thought they could murder her people without consequences. The ship was ready, and she was ready, and somewhere in the dark, between the stars, alien killers were about to learn what human vengeance looked like. Admiral Huang wished her good hunting, and watched through the station windows as the rebuilt Retribution disappeared into hyperspace. Behind it flew the ghost of every human who had ever died fighting aliens, and the promise that their sacrifice would not be forgotten. The war was about to change because one woman had refused to accept defeat and chosen to become something more dangerous than any alien nightmare. Her ship had been crippled, and her crew had been murdered. But now, she was reborn as an angel of death with fusion fire for wings. The rebuilt Retribution moved through hyperspace like a silent predator hunting prey that did not know death was coming for them. Hana sat alone on the bridge where her friends had died, and studied the star charts that showed enemy positions throughout the sector. Her first target was the Valthran supply depot at Nexus Point, where alien ships came to refuel and rearm before attacking human colonies. The depot was built inside a hollowed asteroid that spun slowly in the darkness, surrounded by defensive platforms and patrol ships. Intelligence reports said it held enough weapons and fuel to supply the alien fleet for months of continuous warfare against humanity. Destroying it would hurt the enemy, but more importantly, it would announce that the hunt had begun and death was stalking them. The Retribution dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system where long-range sensors could not detect its presence. Hana activated the cloaking device and watched the ship disappear from her own instruments as it became invisible to everything except her eyes. She flew toward the depot using only passive sensors to navigate while the experimental stealth systems hid her ship from alien detection. The asteroid base was huge with docking bays carved into its surface and weapons batteries that could destroy any attacking fleet. Dozens of Valthran ships floated around it like metal fish, feeding at a reef, while smaller craft moved supplies between them. Hana studied their patrol patterns and counted their weapons until she knew exactly how the defenses worked and where they were weakest. She did not plan to attack the base directly, because that would be suicide, and her death would serve no purpose except to make the aliens laugh. Instead, she would use their own strength against them and turn their fortress into their tomb with just a few carefully placed explosives. The Retribution drifted closer to the asteroid using minimal thrust to avoid detection, while alien ships passed nearby. Without seeing her, she used the ship's repair drones to plant fusion charges on the base's main reactor cores that powered everything from weapons to life support. The charges were small enough to avoid detection, but powerful enough to start a chain reaction that would tear the asteroid apart from inside. When the explosives were in place, Hana moved her ship to a safe distance and activated the communication system to send a message. She broadcast on all alien frequencies so every Valthran in the system would hear what she had to say before they died. Her voice was calm and cold as she spoke the names of her dead crew members one by one, like a prayer for the damned Taeho Park, who had died at his weapons station trying to protect his friends from alien fire. Eugene Lee, who had been crushed in the engine room while fighting to keep the ship alive until the very end. Do-Wan Choi, who had plotted courses through danger without fear because he trusted his captain to bring them. Homyun Bisong, who had listened to enemy transmissions and decoded their secrets even as death closed around her. Wu Jin Nam, who had healed the wounded and comforted the dying because he believed every life had value. She told the aliens that these people had been murdered by cowards who attacked without honor or mercy. Then she promised that their deaths would be avenged 100-fold, and that no alien who had human blood on their hands would live to see another sunrise. The fusion charges detonated exactly as planned and turned the asteroid into a small sun that burned for 30 seconds before collapsing into debris. The explosion destroyed the supply depot and 12 alien ships that were too close to escape. The expanding fireball pieces of rock and metal flew through space at incredible speed and smashed into other ships that thought they were safe. The Retribution was already jumping to hyperspace when the shockwave reached her position and lit up the darkness with the fire of revenge. Hana's next targets were more personal because she wanted to find the 3 ships that had ambushed her crew and make them pay individually. She used the intelligence data taken from the burning depot to track down the first destroyer called Vex Herald as it patrolled the outer rim. The alien ship was alone and confident because its crew thought humans were weak prey that could be hunted without risk. Hana followed it for 2 days, learning its patterns and waiting for the perfect moment to strike with maximum surprise. When the destroyer stopped to investigate a false sensor reading, she had planted the Retribution decloaked directly behind it. Every weapon on her ship fired at once, and turned the alien vessel into expanding gas and twisted metal before it could even send a distress call. The crew died so quickly they never knew what killed them, but their ship's computer recorded everything, including Hana's face. She made sure the recording would be found so other aliens would know that a human was hunting them and death wore a woman's face. The second ship, called Zothmiran, tried to hide in the Crimson Nebula, where the red gas clouds interfered with most sensors. The alien captain thought he was clever using human tactics against a human hunter, but he did not understand who he was fighting. Hana knew these nebula clouds better than the aliens, because human ships had been exploring them for decades. She used the interference to mask her approach and turned their hiding place into a trap that closed around them like a metal fist. The battle was short and brutal, with the alien ship dying in the red mist while its crew screamed in frequencies only their own kind could hear. Hana rigged the wreckage with a beacon that would broadcast those death screams across all Velthran communication channels. She wanted every alien in the sector to hear what happened when they tried to hide from human justice. The third ship, called Krelvathan, was different because it was commanded by War Commander Thexamolar, who had planned the original ambush. He knew someone was hunting his ships, and he was ready for a fight with weapons charged and shields at maximum power. The battle lasted for hours across 3 star systems as both ships jumped through hyperspace trying to gain tactical advantage. Thexamolar was skilled and experienced, and his ship was faster than the rebuilt Retribution. But he was fighting an enemy that could not be broken. Hana had nothing left to lose and everything to gain from his death, so she took risks that no sane captain would ever consider. She rammed her ship through asteroid fields and dove into stellar coronas, where the heat would melt. Normal armor plating. The alien commander began to understand that he was not fighting a normal human, but something that had been forged in the fire of absolute loss. When his weapons damaged her engines, she kept fighting on maneuvering thrusters alone. When her shields failed, she used the ship's armor to absorb hits that should have destroyed her completely. When her main guns overheated, she switched to missiles, and when the missiles ran out, she used the backup lasers. Thexamolar's ship finally died when Hana rammed the Retribution into its bridge section and held the collision until both ships nearly broke apart. She boarded the alien vessel through the breached hull, wearing a spacesuit and carrying weapons that had belonged to her dead friends. The war commander tried to fight her in the smoky corridors of his dying ship, but human determination proved stronger than alien skill. Hana looked into his compound eyes as she killed him slowly, because she wanted him to understand that this was justice for murdered innocents. His death was broadcast live to every Velthran fleet in the sector, and they heard him beg for mercy in the ancient language of his people. But there was no mercy for creatures who had laughed while human blood spilled in the cold vacuum of spaceward. Of the hunting spread through both human and alien territory like wildfire that consumed everything in its path. To humans, Hana became a legend called the Ghost of Kepler, who avenged the innocent dead with fire and steel. To the Velthrans, she became something worse than death because death was final, but she represented endless suffering for their crimes. The alien high command realized they had awakened something terrible when they destroyed the Retribution and murdered its crew. They had thought humans were weak because they valued individual lives, but they learned too late that this was actually their greatest strength. When you killed a human's family, you did not just create an enemy, you created a force of nature that would never stop until justice was done. The hunt had begun, and somewhere in the darkness between stars, an angel of vengeance flew toward her next victims. The news of Hana's war against the Velthran Empire spread across the galaxy. Faster than light itself could travel between the stars, human colonies that had lived in fear of alien attack began to hope again, because one woman with a broken ship was proving that the enemy could bleed. Soldiers told stories about the ghost of Kepler in bars and mess halls, while children played games where they pretended to hunt alien monsters. But in the dark ships of the Velthran fleet, the mood was very different as crews whispered about the human demon that killed without mercy. 3 supply depots had been destroyed along with dozens of patrol ships, and now, even the bravest alien warriors felt fear in their hearts. The high command on the distant homeworld of Velthara Prime decided that the human aberration had to be stopped before it destroyed their entire war effort. They sent Hivemaster Kelvorthak with 50 ships to hunt down and kill the creature that dared to challenge the might of their empire. Kelvorthak was ancient even by alien standards, with scars covering his chitin armor from 1,000 battles across the galaxy. He commanded the respect of every warrior in the fleet, because he had never lost a battle and never shown mercy to any enemy. His flagship was a massive dreadnought called the Death of Worlds that carried enough firepower to level entire planets. The 49 ships that followed him were the best the Empire had, with crews chosen for their skill in hunting dangerous prey. They spread out across the Kepler sector like a metal net designed to trap one human woman, and her impossible ship Kelvorthak studied the reports of the previous attacks and began to understand the tactics his enemy was using against them. She struck without warning at targets that seemed impossible to attack, then disappeared before reinforcements could arrive. Her ship was fast and invisible to their sensors, but more importantly, she thought like a predator instead of a soldier. The Hive Master decided to use bait to lure her into a trap by pretending to transport valuable prisoners to their execution. A fake convoy of prison ships would travel slowly through space, broadcasting distress calls that any human would feel compelled to answer. When she appeared to rescue the prisoners, 50 alien ships would surround her and destroy both her and her vessel. But Hana had been fighting aliens long enough to think like them, and she sensed the trap long before she reached the convoy. She had learned to use their own biology against them by studying the patterns of how hive minds work together. Valthrans depended on their queen ships for coordination and guidance, like worker bees following commands from their royal mother. Disrupt the queens and the entire fleet would become confused and vulnerable to attack by a smaller force. Instead of attacking the convoy directly, she followed the alien ships back to their main fleet, hiding in the shadow of a gas giant. 50 vessels floated in formation around 3 massive queen ships that pulsed with the psychic energy that controlled lesser minds. Hana waited and watched until she understood exactly how their command structure worked and where it was weakest. Then she did something that no alien commander would ever expect, because it went against every rule of space warfare. She hid the retribution inside the wreckage of one of her previous kills and let the alien salvage crews bring her directly into their fleet. The dead Valthran ship drifted among the living vessels like a Trojan horse carrying vengeance in its metal belly. When the fleet prepared to jump into hyperspace to hunt for her, she was already among them like a virus, in their bloodstream. The moment they entered hyperspace, Hana struck with the fury of a solar flare that burned everything in its path. Her first targets were the queen ships that controlled the fleet's coordination and communication systems. She destroyed them one by one with focused fire that turned their massive hulls into expanding clouds of debris. Without their queen mothers, the remaining ships became confused and began attacking each other in the chaos of hyperspace. Some vessels tried to return to normal space but collided with others that were moving in different directions. Others opened fire on anything that moved, including their own allies. Because they could no longer tell friend from enemy, Hana moved through the chaos like a shark, among feeding fish, striking at targets that never saw her coming. Her weapons had been upgraded with alien technology taken from previous kills, and they cut through enemy armor like paper ship after ship died in the swirling madness of hyperspace. While their crews screamed in languages that hurt to hear, Kelvorthak watched his fleet destroy itself and realized he was facing something beyond his understanding or experience. This human fought with a combination of tactical skill and pure hatred. That made her more dangerous than an entire battle fleet. He tried to restore order by sending direct commands to his remaining ships, but most of them were too damaged to respond. The few vessels that could still fight were scattered across light years of twisted space-time and could not coordinate their attacks. When the surviving ships finally escaped back to normal space, only 12 vessels remained out of the original 50. Kelvorthak's flagship was heavily damaged with hull breaches that vented atmosphere into the cold vacuum of space. The Hive Master stood on his bridge surrounded by the bodies of his command crew and felt something he had never experienced before. Fear ran through his ancient body like ice water because he finally understood what kind of enemy he was fighting. This was not a normal human soldier following orders from distant commanders, but something that had been transformed by loss. She was vengeance given form and purpose, with weapons and armor forged from the ashes of everything she had loved. The surviving alien ships tried to flee, but Hana hunted them down one by one like a predator, finishing wounded prey. Each kill was broadcast across all frequencies, so the entire Velthran Empire could hear, their warriors dying in terror. When only Kelvorthak's flagship remained, he tried to open communication channels to negotiate for his life. The ancient warrior offered information about future alien plans and the location of hidden bases throughout. The Sector Hana listened to his words without emotion, then activated the boarding systems to prepare for personal combat. She wanted to look the Hive Master in his compound eyes when she killed him, because some debts could only be paid in blood. The airlock cycled open and she walked into the alien ship wearing armor that had been stained with the blood of his people. Her weapons were the same ones her dead crew had carried when they died defending their ship against impossible odds. Kelvorthak met her in the central corridor with his honor guard of 12 warriors bred specifically for hand-to-hand combat. The battle was brief and brutal, with alien strength and speed matched against human determination and rage. One by one, the guards fell to her superior tactics and weapons until only the Hive Master remained standing. He was ancient and skilled, but she was fighting for the souls of murdered friends, and that made her stronger than any alien. When he finally died, his last sight was her face looking down at him without pity or remorse. She recorded everything, including his final words, begging for mercy in the old tongue of his species. The recording would be transmitted to every Velthran world, so they would know that their greatest warrior had died like a coward. As she walked back to her ship through corridors filled with alien bodies, Hana felt the ghosts of her crew beside her. They whispered words of approval because justice had been served, and their deaths had been avenged in fire and blood. But this was only the beginning, because somewhere in the dark between stars, the Velthran homeworld waited for her coming. The real war was about to begin, and death wore a human face that would haunt alien nightmares until the end of time. The destruction of Kelvorthak's fleet sent shockwaves through the Velthran Empire that reached all the way to their distant homeworld. Supreme Queen Ishaleth felt the death of 50 ships through the psychic network that connected all of her people across the galaxy. For the first time in their species' long history, the Velthrans knew true fear, because one human had proven they were not invincible. Emergency sessions of the High Council were called as reports flooded in about the systematic destruction of their military forces. Entire battle groups had vanished without trace, while supply lines were cut by an enemy that struck without warning then disappeared. The Supreme Queen ordered every available ship to return to Velthara Prime for the final defense of their civilization. 1,000 vessels answered the call, including ancient dreadnoughts that had not fought in wars for centuries. The homeworld's orbital defenses were reinforced with weapons platforms that could destroy entire fleets. No single ship should be able to threaten such massive firepower, but the alien leaders had learned not to underestimate human determination. Meanwhile, Admiral So Young Huang contacted Hana through encrypted channels that could not be detected by enemy forces. The human fleet was mobilizing for war, but they needed the intelligence she had gathered during her campaign of vengeance. Hana agreed to meet them at the rendezvous point in the Outer Rim, where damaged ships could be repaired in secret. The rebuilt Retribution limped into the hidden base with hull plating scarred by weapons fire and systems pushed beyond their limits. Admiral Huang was shocked by how the ship looked, because it seemed impossible that anything so damaged could still fly. But she was more concerned about Hana herself, who had changed during her months alone in enemy territory. The woman who returned was harder and colder than the officer who had lost her crew in the original ambush. Her eyes held the look of someone who had seen too much death and caused too much destruction to ever be fully human again. They met in the Admiral's private office, where star charts covered every wall showing the positions of both human and alien fleets. Hana transferred everything she had learned, including detailed scans of enemy technology and tactical weaknesses. The information was priceless because it revealed exactly how Velthran ships worked and where they were most vulnerable. She also provided the location of their homeworld and the defensive arrangements that protected it from attack. Admiral Huang offered her command of a new fleet with orders to lead the final assault on the alien capital. But Hana refused, because she had one more mission to complete, and it required her to go alone into the heart of enemy space. Using the intelligence from Kelvorthak's ship, she had plotted a course directly to Velthara Prime itself. The journey would take her through the most heavily defended systems. In the alien empire where death waited at every jump point, no fleet could fight its way through such defenses, but a single invisible ship might slip past their sensors. Admiral Huang tried to convince her that suicide would not bring back her dead crew members or win the war, but Hana explained that she was not planning to die until every alien responsible for human deaths had paid the price. She had modified the Retribution's fusion reactors beyond all safety limits, turning the ship into a weapon that could crack planets. When she reached Velthera Prime, she would dive into the atmosphere and detonate her engines in the planet's core. The chain reaction would destroy the homeworld and break the psychic network that held their empire. Together, it was a suicide mission, but it would also be the final victory that ended the war and saved millions of human lives. The Admiral gave her blessing, because she understood that some battles could only be won by ultimate sacrifice. Hana launched from the secret base, knowing she would never return, but feeling more at peace than she had since losing her crew. The journey to Velthera Prime took her through systems where no human had ever been, and few had ever returned. She passed ancient alien monuments that told the history of conquests spanning thousands of years. The Vilthrons had destroyed countless civilizations and enslaved entire species in their march across the galaxy. Now their victims would have justice delivered by one woman, with nothing left to lose except her life. The defenses around the homeworld were unlike anything she had ever seen, with weapons that could vaporize moons. 1,000 ships patrolled the system in formations designed to stop any possible attack on them. They were looking for fleets and battle groups, not a single vessel that could become invisible to their sensors. The Retribution slipped through their defenses like a ghost passing through walls of steel and energy. Hana activated the ship's final modifications as she approached the planet that had spawned the killers of her crew. The fusion reactors began an uncontrolled chain reaction that would build to critical mass in exactly 30 minutes. That was enough time to reach the planet's surface and penetrate deep enough to ensure complete destruction. The alien fleet detected her when she entered the atmosphere, but by then it was too late to stop what she had started. Waves of fighters swarmed around her ship like angry insects, trying to bring down a falling star. Their weapons hammered her shields and armor but could not penetrate the reinforced hull that protected the reactors. Massive dreadnoughts fired planet-killing weapons that lit up the sky with energy that could be seen from orbit. But the Retribution continued its dive toward the planet's core while systems overloaded and bulkheads buckled. Hana sat alone on the bridge where her friends had died and felt their presence surrounding her in the final moments. Taeho was at his weapons station returning fire at the pursuing fighters with guns that would never miss their targets. Yujin was in the engine room coaxing more power from reactors that should have exploded already. Duan plotted their course through the planet's crust toward the molten core where their mission would end. Yunbi monitored the enemy communications as they realized what was about to happen to their world. Wujin stood ready to ease the pain of death when it finally came for all of them together. The Supreme Queen herself tried to contact Hana and offer terms for surrender, including the complete withdrawal from human space. But there could be no negotiation with creatures who had murdered innocents and laughed about their victims. The Retribution struck the planet's surface at near light speed and continued downward through rock and metal. Behind it, the surface began to crack as seismic waves spread outward from the impact point. The fusion explosion that followed was visible from neighboring star systems as Velthera Prime died in nuclear fire. The planet's destruction broke the psychic network that connected all Velthrons and left their fleets leaderless and confused, without their homeworld and their queens. The remaining alien forces surrendered or scattered to distant systems. The war ended, not with massive fleet battles, but with one woman's refusal to accept defeat. Admiral Huang received Hana's final transmission just before the explosion that ended everything. She had kept her promise to her dead crew and avenged their murders with the complete destruction of their killers. Humanity built memorials to the crew of the Retribution at the site of their first battle against impossible odds, but they also built something else that would ensure their sacrifice was never forgotten. A new class of warship was named after Hana Kim and designed with the same philosophy that had driven her. These vessels carried crews who understood that some enemies could never be negotiated with or reformed. When faced with extinction, Humans would fight with determination that made them more dangerous than any alien nightmare. The galaxy learned that humanity's greatest strength was not their technology or their numbers. It was their refusal to surrender even when facing impossible odds and certain death. Individual humans might die, but their species would endure and remember and eventually claim justice for every drop of spilled blood in the years that followed. Other alien races approached humanity with respect instead of contempt. They had heard the stories about the ghost of Kepler who destroyed an entire empire to avenge her murdered friends. Some threats were too dangerous to ignore, and some enemies were better left unmolested. The stars belonged to those with the courage to claim them and the strength to hold them against all challengers. Humanity had proven they possessed both qualities in abundance. Her ship had been crippled, her crew had been murdered, but her vengeance had saved a civilization and changed the galaxy forever.